Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad yourself.
Uh, pretty good, pretty good. I'm out here, staying alive.
Sounds good. And that is some. Trying to finish a few diagrams to explain a few things. Give me a few seconds and then
Okay,
be with you folks.
sounds good.
Okay.
Hey, how's it going?
Not bad yourself.
Good. Your screen creates a very interesting effect on your glasses. There's like this purple, now
No?
you're looking down, I don't see it, but when you're looking up, there's like this purple
Ah,
box.
yes.
It's neat. It looks almost like intentional.
It isn't. But it's interesting. Yes, I can see it.
Hey, Manu.
Hey, how's it going, girl?
Good, good.
I got to check out your site,
Oh, nice.
and yeah, it was pretty cool. I liked the Substack explanation of it. I feel like it did a really good job of kind of describing
In the
everything.
docs.
Yeah, was that Substack or was that?
It's no, it's like a custom, doc site. I'm using it's called Nextra, which is a
Mhm.
project built on top of Next.js, trying to focus on either creating blogs or documentation sites. But that's good. I think you thought it was Substack because that means it looks at least pretty good.
Yeah,
He's
that was really cool.
yeah,
I like the navigation tools and everything. Yeah.
cool. I found a little cool technique with that where I'm hosting that for free. Well, not free. I'm hosting on S3 in AWS, which is not which is pretty cheap because normally Next.js wants you to like host on their site for to get all of their
Mm.
fancy features, and that's not cheap. It's like $20 a month. So there's like one little tweak I was able to add. Where like I don't know, it's I don't know if you're interested, but like if you're ever interested in self-hosting a site like that for cheapish in S3, I can point you to my Stack Overflow question and the little code snippet basically that makes that feasible. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm curious to this conversation because I mean, I think the docs maybe are the most useful part of what I'm doing right now because the site itself, there's just trying to organize this information is challenging. And very much comes down
Mhm.
to what are you trying to do? What are you trying to show? Who's the audience? Is one person doing it? Is it a group of people? Is it Wikipedia level where a huge massive number of people are supposed to be reading the thing or seeing it? Um, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully we'll be
Um,
able
I,
to. What
I
was
was
that?
just I was
Okay.
trying to find. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I-
I was just gonna say. I was trying to find it because now I've found it twice and forgotten it twice. I think it comes from Steven, who hasn't been in our group recently, but he's like a human computer interaction PhD and is interested in this space too. He has a tool called Socrates, which is probably still up. Like he and I were not working together at all, but we came up with similar-ish, initial approaches, which my point being, someone, and I couldn't find this paper, someone created a taxonomy, I think of fact checking platforms, and they had like five different like basic types they said of like how people approach to presenting the info. I only remember two of them, which are the two that Stephen focused on in his PhD thesis, I think, or at least in something he wrote about it afterwards, which is map, which we're all kind of looking at like 2D canvas, potentially with the fixed axis, although I don't think people are talking about that fixed z-axis thing much in that context. And then what's called a container, which I think I'm saying this all correctly, which is this idea that you have kind of like something at the top that's what this view is about, and then often like these columns or things that drop out of them. So like in Howju, it's this proposition, is it true or false, or maybe affirmatively unknown, not possible to know it's true or whatever. And then two columns underneath saying yes, yes, true, or no, false, or I haven't added the third one, like, affirmatively neutral. But I would like to. And Steven has kind of the same idea where it's like he has this claim up top, and he has like a cool looking tree, view, and then like pros on one side, cons on the other. Yeah. Sorry, that's what I had to say.
Yeah. One thing Jack and I keep trying to hammer is not everything is a pro-con. A lot of thing is, relevant data, question, consider this is a term that Jamie uses over at Society Library. So there's many ways to actually enrich a debate if you get out of the pro-con constraint. And I think it's important to get out of the pro-con mindset sometimes to get people out of that antagonistic frame. It's like, can we reframe it this way? Can we think of it this way? So this is, for me, it's really important to not just have the pro-con frame.
That's a tough one for me. Sorry, let me just, if you don't mind, just respond quickly. It's a tough one for me because on the one hand, like, absolutely you're right. Like getting into this binary mindset, just creating division. But at the same time, like, and this is kind of something I've been trying to figure out what to do with Howju. I think it's important to try and guide people towards like, hey, let's try to agree upon what we think is worth answering, like whether it's true or false. And then yes, I think it is important to dive into, is it true or is it false? Or is it not, or is it, potentially affirmatively neither?
Yep.
Because otherwise, anyway, yeah, I don't know.
No, I don't disagree with that. And certainly a lot of lateral moves, like sometimes, when I'm having an argument with someone, I'll go, oh, okay, well, I'll let's agree to disagree, or all opinions are good, or we all have our opinions. It's like, no, that's just giving up. It's perfectly discouraging. On the other hand, there's such thing as an asking a question, like the if you've read Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, a lot of old questions just got unasked, like they became irrelevant. Like, what is the weight of phlogiston? Well, there's no such thing as phlogiston. So the question about the weight of phlogiston became meaningless. And I think that's an important case. A question that becomes meaningless because it's been unasked. Like I remember Hofstadter arguing for mu as an answer, a kind of Zen koan. This question makes no sense. Or the classic, what was your face before you were born? It's the and Society Library does not do that, but they do something important. Like this is the debate map idea, the relevance. Relevance is saying, yeah, that's true, but not relevant. It's another axis. What do you mean by X? Like, climate change will cause civilizational collapse. How do you define climate change? How do you define collapse? Like, that's a good question to ask. This is not about true or false. It's about opening up or being more precise or being, and that's valid. I mean, sometimes it's used as a diversionary tactic, which is another story, but, or why do you ask that? Like dog whistles. Why, like it sounds innocuous, but why do you ask that? There's an implied claim behind it. That's not a yes, no. It's something else again. So I think it's important to not just think of yes, no questions. But I agree. At times, a yes, no question is really important, and you don't want people to evade it. But again, make it clear when you're evading it, and versus when you're trying to answer and trying to find reasons to believe or disbelieve, which is a valuable and important activity. But it's a valuable and important activity to get out of that at times. Anyway, that's my usual rant. I've made it often. I mean, who hasn't heard it quite so often, but
Have we told Amanu how we do our hand signals in here, or have we just
yeah, this is yay.
Yeah.
Agree. Yay. Actually, this is yeah, and this is
and then
really
disagree?
weirdo. Yeah,
I don't remember where
Okay.
that comes from, but it's a
from
standard
Occupy actually.
from Occupy. Okay. They figured out a way to do hand signals to not interrupt the speaker, and it works really good over video, especially with
Alright,
lag.
cool.
So
Cool.
some people it's like, why are you doing jazz hands all the time? Let's agree.
I figured, but it's good to have confirmation.
Yeah, we need a little meeting tips and tricks document.
Yeah.
Did we always
Okay.
I
came in late? Did we have a topic? I mean, I know it's user experience, and
We were going to speak
Yes,
about UX. I have things to show, but it's very early in the day, and I'm just trying to give you an idea of something I'm trying to show to think about. But if it could be shown very quickly, I don't know if others have things to show. Maybe I don't think I'm going to see in your work, Bentley, if you should at least show what you're doing. And
yeah. And if you start, give me a second to see if I can get the
Sure.
latest version running, and how bad it's broken.
And I know I interrupted Amanu at least once, so I apologize. That yeah, but please, yeah, cut in here and make sure we see anything you wanted to share too. I didn't bring anything, so I'm just here to talk and observe.
and listen.
Yeah.
So for the record, this is not published anywhere, but I'd like it to be considered slightly copyrighted. I'm normally very big on everything's open, and I am going to open source this, of course, but I do want the, how should I put it? I want to publish something about this and have the credit at least.
And you're still okay with this video going live?
I'm okay with this video being live because in a way, this is kind of first publication in a way.
And no one
But,
watches these anyway, so it doesn't matter. But
Yeah. But I'll be able
this
to
will be
explain.
evidence. This will be your envelope, where you mail yourself the thing, so you
Exactly.
have
Yeah. Exactly.
timestamp.
Precisely the point. Yes.
Poor man's
Where's the
copyright, I
share
think, is what they used to call
share screen? Okay. So this is really tentative, but I'm trying to give an idea here. So the idea, this is a UX for multiple, for recursive hypergraphs, which has been my thing. We want multiple layers of interpretation and so on and so forth. So this is just to give an idea. So suppose you have a bunch of sentences and claims basically. And by the way, these could be this could be a flexible list with things coming in and out, but it's easier to understand if there's only a few right now. And so this is just for the record. And the idea is you have these bead lines, and normally I would have like to populate more than one of them, but the idea is you have these colored beads and shape beads for Daltonians, for colorblind people. And those are roles. This is saying this line plays this role in this structure, and each line would be a different structure. So for example, causality could be on one line, and taxonomy could be on another line, and so on and so forth. And the roles would be, for example, in this case, this is cause, positive effect, negative effect, and so on. So here you just have one bead per role that this plane plays in any structure. And then if I click on this, like that would select it, and then I'd say, okay, I'd have a fade out of a lot of claims. So this is playing all these roles, and here are other claims that are in structures with this thing. Or I could even be more precise and click on the bead, like if I click on this orange thing, then I'll say, okay, well, I've selected this, and then I've deselected the other roles. And that means, well, it's only this cause with this effect. That's it. Or there could be more than one. Again, there could be more than one thing going against this, for example. And another thing I could do also is select two of them, like from the previous state, like shift click probably, and then say, okay, I'm selecting these, and then I have only these things. And then I could show other stuff that is in relationship with those two maybe, and that would be a different thing. But the idea is to being able to have things that are related to this. And for the hypergraph aspect, like the idea is once I have selected the structure, I should be able to, I don't know, hit a key something, and then say, okay, these two rows or this column element, actually I'm making it into a row. So these two things are there, and here are the kind of connecting words. So this structure has this role and this role. This is a bit misaligned. I should change that, but that's not important. And then this could also have other beads to say, well, this is itself used as an argument for something else, or this is disproven by this, and this could be in another relationship with another claim, because I've made it into a thing in the structure. So this is very primitive. There's much more that I'm thinking about there, but I just want to give this idea that it's possible to have this structure that shows multi-level relationships. And the idea is, imagine you have multiple lines with multiple structures, then you'd see at the same time, here's all that's connected to this. And then you could have, and this is, of course, it gets complicated, but and I need animation and like just showing it without, but I have, here are, because I've selected this, here are things that were not yet on the screen that should be on the screen because they're connected to that. So there would be one line that would not be a structure, but would be kind of salience, and anything that's been selected lately would be salient. I could pin stuff on that line, and then I'd be able to say anything related to one of these things, including the structures they're part of, would be kind of shown at different degrees of salience, and it would give me an ordering, and I'd see more or less of what I want based on that. So this is where I'm going in terms of presenting a bunch of argument, or the local neighborhood of a bunch of argument, in a way that allows me to show synthetically all the relationship between multiple things. So there's elision, there's kind of overload of beads. Like it may not be obvious, but let me go back to this. Here, what I'm doing, it's possible that there's 4 structures where this is a consequence. I would not put 4 beads there. I would put 1 because it's just 1 per type. But then when if I have a double selection, then I'd have many things that could lead to that. And I'd have a small number. I could start putting numbers. One thing I've been thinking is at the bottom, here are so many structures with this role, so many structures with this role, so many structures, or this role in so many structures, this role in so many structures, this role in so many structures. So as you filter out things, you'll get to know what it's related to and be able to have, okay, I want to focus on those and filter those. So there's a whole selection, pre-selection, filtering interaction I need to get into. But the notion that there's neighborhood filters is something I think allows me to navigate causal relationships that way. So that's kind of where I'm going with still looking for names for this. I think I'll call it a tipu because, it's many lines with knots. And that was the Inca kipu. And this is prototype of stuff I'm doing.
Cool.
That's neat. I mean, I really like it. I the way I'm thinking about it is because you're taking paragraph text, like runs of text, and you're structuring it. One way you're structuring it is you're kind of like breaking them up sequentially, like one after another. And then you also have this, the lines on the side to help capture flow with the knots to, highlight connection.
That is indeed a view. It's not what I was showing in a way, but it is. In a sense, I was thinking of just nodes as one line per node, but I have thought very much about doing this for text, for a run of text. Yes. It's a bit different in a run of text because the same claim can be made in many points in the text.
Right.
So there's no, you don't have the notion of identity, but yes, I've been totally thinking about having the Kipu line, and then ideally you'd have a kind of zoom. Here's all the beads in the text compressed, and here's the window of what you have in your viewport with more space, right? So you'd have all the beads kind of collapsed on top of one another at the top, or maybe just numbers at the top and bottom, above and below the current view. And then yes, here are the beads that are aligned with text elements. Absolutely, that is in scope. And what is cool also is it's the last thing I showed, where you can have a materialized structure. Like if you have, for example, defined terms or things like that in text, they would find their way into text, and you could click on it, make sure it's in the view, like pin it in the view, and you can see, oh, this one is in this taxonomy relationship with these variants, for example, and then go back and forth between different structures, like the causality structure, the taxonomy structure. Each of these is an axis. And this is very much inspired by parallel coordinates work. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Who?
Parallel coordinates. Like when people want to represent very high dimensional data space, what they do sometimes is they have one line per axis. And then a point in n-dimensional space, if there's n lines, becomes, well, here's this point here's the position on this line, and then you have a line connecting it to that position on the next line, and then line going to the position next line, and so on. So a point in n-dimensional space becomes a line in these parallel coordinates, a line that goes at different positions. And you have all of them kind of superimposed, but you can do range zooms on any one coordinate and then see how how it implies the other coordination. And something really cool about parallel coordinate, the mathematical property of it, is that a line in n-dimensional space, it's a bunch of points. Those points will be so many of those zigzag lines going around the parallel coordinates. But if it's a straight line in n-dimensional space, all these lines will kind of have the same or related axis and will actually converge to a point. A line becomes a point. A point becomes a line, and a line becomes a point. It's very cute mathematical property. Anyway, this is not what I'm doing, but the idea that parallel coordinates are cool, by the way. They're a cool little advanced data representation widget with interesting mathematical properties. And I was inspired by that and by previous work with GEOPS. And Luc had something he called PPCG, where the inventor of GEOPS, I think I showed GEOPS the pyramid, the way it was a way to represent very, very large trees on a pyramid with node reuse. And he also had a version for graphs where basically each node was a row and each edge was a column, so to speak. And he had a very efficient representation like that, very much inspired by this. But I'm doing this further elision of a bead per row. Cheops as in the Egyptian pyramid. I'll give you that reference. That's way earlier work.
Thanks.
It's a very old picture. This is an ancient site. I haven't haven't updated it in decades. And unfortunately, the Java doesn't work anymore. I should someday resurrect this because it's still interesting, I think.
There's Java applets on it.
Yeah, Java, not even 1.0 at the time.
Wow.
Java 0 point something beta or 1 beta something. I don't remember.
Cool.
Ancient work.
Hmm.
So I could give a quick, well, sort of quick description of what I'm doing, or Amanu, do you have anything you wanted to share more? Or? Yeah, you're still muted.
Um, no, I don't have anything that I'm ready to share for this meeting. I just kind of wanted to talk and work through some things. Um, yeah, I kind of had a burnout week. I was going way too hard for way too long, and so I've just been recuperating. But yeah, I was hoping to
I guess last Friday was
develop some
exciting.
things. Yeah, but before that, I was going nonstop day and night, like for a while.
Wait, what
Uh,
happened that was exciting?
oh,
Well,
just uh,
finding
meeting
a
everyone
community
and
is
then
always
seeing all this.
Oh, the one we met. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you had like some landmark, I don't know, something happened in your life. Or...
I'm also moving out this week, and so like getting ready for that and all that.
Where are you, like,
Uh,
if I may ask?
I'm right outside DC. I'm in Alexandria.
Oh, nice. I used to live in DC, in
Yeah,
Arlington,
it's cool.
like 13
Yeah,
years.
cool. Yeah,
I was in the city for
yeah,
a
it's
few.
great. Like if I showed you outside my window, I'm on the 14th floor of my apartment, so I can see Arlington from here. It's pretty cool,
Oh, sweet.
and
Yeah.
everything I can see Washington Monument, all of it.
Awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. But yeah. Oh yeah. So I'd love to see what you got, Mr. Bentley.
Yeah, let's see. Share screen. Now I'm gonna I could also probably use some help because I am gonna be presenting this to someone who is working in the AI space and in causal loop diagrams and is familiar with Bayes' theorem and probabilities. And anyone who knows all that stuff usually misinterprets what I show them. Because there's some very different conceptual things. So the way I'm thinking of describing it is that this is kind of a spreadsheet for reasoning. And some of the aspects of, and maybe even, I don't know if people know the term ledger. It's really the simplest use case of a spreadsheet, right? So if you have a bank account, you put in all your charges in your transaction, it gives you a total. The total doesn't necessarily have to be correct. It's based on the information you put into it. So if you left something out, it's wrong. There's a time it's zero, even though your bank account, may have money in it. There's all these things, and it's like it's never, completely done until you've double checked all the information you put in it. And it's just the reflection of the information in the system. And there's usually not assumptions. You don't want to put in, oh, I thought it was $100. I'm just going to throw in $100. Which is a lot of what you're doing in Bayes and in theories is you're making probability guesses. And that's not what the system is. This is more like a way to track. These are the reasons why I think this statement, and usually, like Marc-Antoine and Carl were talking about, it's the kind of the Boolean, the yes, no questions are helpful, but they're not probably the most important questions. And this system, to begin with, starts with the smallest atomic unit of, a yes, no question. Is this, we disagree on this point of fact. How can we keep track of all of our arguments for and against it? And the weights of those arguments and argue about the weights and document our arguments about the weights and why the weights, the reasons for the weights. So how strong an argument is, we want to have that explicitly in the argument, which is a piece I think a lot of the systems are not emphasizing yet. So just kind of as an example, although I kind of wish the problem is the stuff I can't really like add and remove claims in this right now because the UI is broken. I just tried the new one. I couldn't get it working. So this one's kind of static data. And I don't know how easy this is to see, but the example I caught. Were you gonna say something, Mark Anton?
We don't see much, right? We see just this
Yeah,
little bit.
I'm covering up the whole thing.
Okay, that's a choice. Good. Wanted to be sure.
Yeah. So like imagine you were at I forgot it's gonna all show up every time I click on anything. But in general, like let's say that the city's trying to decide to convert a street, towards pedestrian use only. So that might be kind of the question, and it's got a score here that's based on all the information that we've included. And right now I'm not presenting numbers, and I don't know if I can show them real easily, but that's about the scale right now goes from like, yeah, one of the problems is deciding what the scale is. There's several ways you can express it. Like, it could be like, we don't know whether this is true or false, or 100% we know it's absolutely true, or negative 100% we know it's absolutely false. In this case, if it goes negative, we just flip the question. So then it's like, how kind of truthful is this? And right now it's at like 30, we're like 30% confident we should we should convert this street into pedestrian use only instead of having cars on it. And these are kind of like all the reasons that we thought of on why to do it and not do it. The purple ones are reasons to do it. The orange ones are reasons not to. And kind of like one of the more interesting ones is that someone had a concern that the conversion will divert traffic down residential streets. So you imagine that that's a concern. So it's endangering children's lives. And definitely, this is strengthening that argument. Increasing the weight of this is the fact that child safety is important. So we kind of state that as a claim, and no one's debating what that claim, right? So it just adds weight. But is it actually true that the conversion will divert traffic down? And I have some test things in here, but they found out after someone made that complaint, they added this that said, a set of railroad tracks is no longer used by the city. They'll convert that to a new street in parallel, so the diverted traffic has some place to go. So that counters this argument, and then this argument has less weight, and then it comes out into the total. So people then don't. One of the biggest things I see when people are arguing is that they will either forget something we said back here, or they'll have an intuition. They'll still be afraid of this. And so the weighting in their mind, my contention is that everyone's brain is doing this weighting. They're just doing it through intuition and heuristics rather than math. So by the time you talk through all the pros and cons on a complex issue, they can't hold all that in their brain, just the same way we can't hold our bank account in our brain. So this is a way to kind of see it, and then you can inspect each individual piece and make sure it's correct. And once you're comfortable that all the individual pieces are correct, you could do this, or you could defer that and say, oh, my friend checked this whole thread, right? And I trust him, so I don't have to read all of this, or he's an expert in roads. Go ahead, Carl.
I just trying to ask a question about the argument because I don't quite understand. So should the fictional city convert Elm Street? Okay. And then the person says could endanger children, so that block. But then I don't understand that purple one, the railroad tracks no longer in use, because how is that relevant to Elm Street? Shouldn't that be an argument like against the Elm Street conversion and say there's a better choice than Elm Street?
No, what they're doing is they're taking those railroad tracks and making it a street, and they're diverting the traffic that would have gone into the children's neighborhoods down
Oh, I
that.
see. So they're saying we'll convert Elm Street, but instead of the traffic going into neighborhoods, it's going to go to this other rail track conversion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a counter to this one.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and part of that is, writing these things clearly so that when people read it, they make sense. So that could probably be clear.
Yeah, I was just thinking, why not use that railroad for the Elm Street conversion? But
Well, the whole,
no.
I guess the point of the conversion is to increase local traffic of the businesses that are on Elm Street.
The stores, gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah. Now, it's more useful when it is and actually this may make noise. Here.
This example,
Hold on. To see, this is the old kind of UI, but it's more interesting to see that debate as you're adding records and you see the score go up and down. But since I don't have the UI doing that, I can't demo with the new UI, but in the old UI, you would see this score. Right now it's represented by this kind of balloon at the top. You see it moving left and right as people add claims. I think it's easier to follow. I just haven't been able to make this video for the new UI. But yeah. So that's the thought. And then I'm gonna try to, what I think I'm gonna do is take debates and make videos going through it using this tool, and then seeing if I could get people to donate to the creating of those videos. And also the videos would be multiple videos in a series. So it'd be like, here's the data we have so far. People go back and find facts and tell us we're wrong. And then you'd have an update video saying, okay, here's the evidence that people have added or the reasons people have added since that last video. And then you just keep doing videos till people run out of stuff to say.
This is a fascinating example here, because when you say it will pay off the expense in under 2 years, like, okay, is that the original expense of the street conversion, or does that include the railroad track conversion? Because something I find is you can make the argument, and then that argument, okay, we've taken care of that, and it's kind of forgotten that this now has to be part of the cost because it's a new proposal with this added cost.
Yeah, you're right. So when we added this down here, then
Yep.
this number, you could either splinter into two debates, or you could say, oh, no one's going to like that old one. We'll just go this, and we'd increase this to 3 years instead of 2. And then,
Yeah, what I would do is I'd have the original proposal, just convert Elm Street, and then I'm creating a new proposal, convert Elm Street and the railroad, and then the arguments would be shared or not between the two proposals, right?
well,
and they
yeah,
would be
I mean,
shared with variants.
right. In a final system, I don't want to spend that development time until I know that this will be useful. So until then, you just decide I could copy paste, just do it manually.
Yep.
So I don't know, Manu, if you have any questions about that, or if Carl, if you think of any of my wording would be confusing to someone. Mark Antoine.
Carl, you want to go first?
Well, so I'll suggest what I was going to say, but my thing was I had a question that kind of is both related to Bentley's and Mark's and Mark Antoine's. And so I didn't want to jump into it's related, of course, but like I didn't want to jump in a different tangent. If you had something more specific just to reason score you wanted to ask or suggest. So you go ahead if you do.
What I have to say, I think, is also a little general. But
Well, go ahead. I've been talking a lot.
okay. So something I've been thinking a lot about is the compression of all of this information. Because as we build out these trees on and on and on, it becomes less useful over time, even though we're adding more information. So I've been trying to think about how we can organize it in a way that as it gets updated, the most relevant information that makes it as concise as possible gets pushed towards the front, and then you can look for more information beyond that. But I do like the scoring aspect, and everything.
And that's the crux of what this is trying to solve, because what information do you want to have when you're reading this? First thing I want to know is how confident am I on it? And then but I don't want to read all 1,000 claims, right? So the question is, what do I read next? Well, since I in this system know the weights, I know there's a big supporter here, there's a medium counter, and then there's a small counter. And I could see later on these words will kind of be more there. So then you can say, oh, I need to read. I think this is wrong. I think this thing about the street conversion, I think, is more important. So I would then open this up, look at it, and then say, oh, okay, well they have a con against it. What is their con? It's like, oh, they're going to make the railroad tracks. I didn't have to read everything to understand that. But if there's no scoring mechanism, you have to read every note to make, and you have to do the weights in your brain. So
But this is almost a counterexample, because the score will make that third line, the thin line, go last, right? So you'll see the two big lines first, and you'll see the thin line go last. Whereas it's extremely important, the thin line, because it's the one you'd find important. And the reason it's last is because there is a counter argument. And the other thing that almost bothers me is when it becomes unimportant, again, it's easy to forget, oh, it's unimportant if we do this counter and also convert the railroad track.
well, so let me hit the first thing first, is that the actual order is not important. It's a choose your own adventure. You decide which thread to go down.
Yeah, but you were arguing
So-
that the weight would help direct attention
Yeah.
earlier.
Uh-huh. So, but you can see there's not going to be ever more than 5 or 6 child nodes. I know, well, let's just say when you're because I actually don't know I don't know what order to put in this path, because there's several ways. One is I want to know what the pros are, the highest ranked pros. I want to see the lowest ranked pros, the highest ranked cons, the lowest ranked. It depends on what I'm looking for. So all that
Right.
information would be sorted. But if you don't have the numbers, you literally have to read. But you
Right.
usually know. I know the reason. I want to inspect the reasons why people think it's not true. I want to inspect the reasons why I think it's true, or I just want to, maybe I want to read it. But the most you'd want to do is read one whole level. You don't have to read. It's exponentially less reading, even if you have to read them all.
What I would actually argue is that in many cases, the most useful thing to do is to read the most contentious aspects, where
Yeah,
there's
well,
a lot of pro, lots of cons.
right.
That's a really interesting. That's a really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
case.
that's right. And that's the data that I'm not capturing yet, because that's a
Well,
whole.
you are in a bit with this little brick wall.
I mean, I could tell you that, yeah, I mean, I could tell you this thread, like I could put a number on here to tell you how many descendant nodes are on there, and then you'd know that people have had a lot of reasons. But that doesn't mean, yeah, right. Sorry, man, I did.
So I definitely no worries. I definitely like the idea of ascribing weight to everything, and using that as a system of navigation. Um, the angle that I have been trying to come at my work with is basically looking at information across all 3 dimensions as being one and the same, and just having different forms of representation. And so I wanted to toy with that aspect to present information as maybe initially as just a block of text. And you can, if you want to, read a paragraph summarizing everything. And you can read it in kind of paragraph format. And I think that that would be, if somebody that was good at writing could write it out like that, then that could lay it out one way. Some people, it's like, oh, a block of text doesn't work for me. Then they go to 2 dimensions and like a thread style, and they can have it laid out like that. And it kind of visually might be more organized for them. And then if somebody wants to see the actual conversation itself and how it branches out, then I think that this should be like the third option. And basically it's like, yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think all of us kind of agree there's going to be multiple UIs. So I'm working on two there. One is the scoring mechanism to get these numbers, and then the other one is an initial UI. But I imagine, and like Marc Antoine was saying, there's going to be, you're going to want to look. Some people are going to want to say, well, what's the most contentious thing? And sometimes you're going to go and then you're going to say, oh, I know that they did not take this killing children thing into account. So I'm going to look for where that goes and put it in. But Carl.
Yeah, I have a question. I like that idea a lot, and yeah, I agree. I'm interested in that sort of multiple layers or like progressive revealing, or it's not quite the right word, but progressive something refinement, maybe probably revealing. The question occurs to me that I'm curious about for that that UX is kind of like how do you decide on what that first layer is? Does it have to be consensus, like majority wins, or is it editorial where like some group of moderators gets the final say in what the wording is of that piece of text? Is there some way to generate it based upon the low level below? Yeah, those kinds of questions. Like how do you agree upon that? Because people sometimes take the particular wording very seriously for good reason, and if there's a disagreement about it, yeah.
The way I envision it. Oh, sorry. Did you want to say something?
Go. There he is.
The way I've envisioned it is having sort of this. Well, I definitely think that there needs to be moderation in what I'm working on, and I believe that people who are very passionate about these things will take up the mantle and work together with other people to kind of figure out the wording. And if it doesn't work, then that gets critiqued and improved. But when it comes to just the overall structure, what I envisioned was having basically two individual spaces that interact with one another. One is like no man's land where everyone can do whatever they want and can edit and make changes and converse with one another. And then another one that pulls from that no man's land and takes kind of the relevant arguments and important things, and they can kind of reference one another, or I guess it would be kind of, yeah, they can reference one another, and yeah, they play with each other in that way.
We're definitely getting into federation territory, right? I mean, that's what I'm thinking of doing with hyperknowledge, have multiple spaces and ideally have individual spaces and community spaces. Like this, for example, research community is working on this, and it will look at in greater detail at a certain issue. And that details that few people will be interested in, but then they can provide, here's the bird's eye view of what we're doing in our research community. And other communities can reference that and aggregate and federate. I'm totally with that. It's still a bit of hand waving, because the question of authority, like terms matter, and when you have multiple sides who are in conflict, they'll actually spend a lot of time arguing about vocabulary and definitions and terms, because terms shape a lot of things. And I do think it's important actually to show that like this is this thing, this is one definition, and this is how it's defined. Here's alternate formulations by people who agree or disagree, and like what are, and get people to even vote on formulations. But again, what's the top voted formulation for people who agree, and what's the top voted formulation for people who disagree? Because both of these at least need to be shown, at least, maybe more, but find clusters of epistemic clusters, and from there say, okay, how do they define it? And more important for me, than leaving it as a multiplicity. It's about saying, okay, why don't you like those terms? And what does it not capture according to you? And have actually a structure that describes, well, here, I think this term does not capture this, or I think it implies this, and make the contention about why you don't like that definition and justify it. And I think this becomes part of the argument. And this is not about, and again, this is another great example of an argument that's not about right and wrong, but it's about how do we define the question? And, and I think this
And
needs to be part of the conversation.
so what I wanted to do to facilitate that process is when I was I don't know if you remember last time I brought up the idea of like heavily hypertexted like paragraphs, and you can kind of toggle on and off the hypertext aspect, and you can, if you feel like something is worded weirdly, you can toggle on the hypertext mode and then see their reasoning for why they worded it like that. And so everything just has more information as long as people are willing to add it. And yeah.
Well, my question is, what if you see the word, the wording, and you think it's I don't know, whatever, you disagree with it, or you want to add more, and so you want to change it. Like, who owns that changing process? And like, I guess to make things concrete, although it's not a perfect example, I wanted to contribute to Wikipedia a year or two ago. Well, actually, first I want to read about Steem, the cryptocurrency, or it's a whole platform for sharing content. STEEM. And I don't remember, I haven't looked at the Wikipedia page recently, but there's an interesting like history to that cryptocurrency platform where the founders, I think they were like what's the word? Yeah, like a hostile takeover occurred. It's a really interesting backstory, like crypto, whatever, suspense. And I wanted to add that background. I was like, oh, this, this is blah, blah. This is my summary from having looked into this. And the person, that mod who, became aware of my edits, said, no, I'm sorry, Cointelegraph or whatever. I don't remember which sources I was citing. Like, these are not considered authoritative news sources. I'm going to revert your changes. And I think after the fact, I found like a more authoritative source where Ethan Zuckerman had written up like a long, description of what had happened, and it was on a domain that was probably would have been acceptable. I think it might have been on like Knight Foundation, which is like a well-known journalistic organization. But at that point, I was already kind of like tired of interacting. I was like, well, I just put in all this effort. Maybe it's me for being lazy, but I was annoyed that this mod came in and said, no, you can't play here because I don't think, and this policy over here says that particular source is below the bar. It's like, well, isn't there value? And I know Wikipedia can't do it this way and doesn't do it this way, and doesn't have the tooling to support it, but wouldn't there be value for at least my edit to exist, or like my contribution to exist in some federation, as Marc Antoine might call it, where, yeah, I mean, it's not the primary Wikipedia, or it's not the primary page, but like I can show people this is it, and I can add on to that later. And like, of course, I know that the history technically is available somewhere if I wanted to dig through, but no one else can say, oh yeah, I agree with Carl. Like, let's say that thing stood off to the side and you could get to it if you were really curious. And then someone said, oh, I agree with Carl. I see this mod's, disagreement as to why it got put off to the side, but I know about this Ethan Zuckerman article that I'm going to now improve this, put in the citations to the more authoritative source. And then let's say the mod comes in later, says, or that person proposes merging. Oh yeah, okay, now I see this is backed up by authoritative source. Let's merge it in. Now it's part of the mainline. Sorry, I mean, I don't know if that was too much of a diversion, but that's the sort of thing
No. This is
Carl wants to have. I was reading someone who was talking about Twitch, I believe. I think it was UX or UI designer there, and they're like, hey, we think of this in terms of spaces. What is the not physical literally, but what is the space a person owns? How do they define and delineate that space? How do we keep that space, like safe and reliable for them, or gives them what they want? And then they went into talking about the different moderation techniques they've added for, Twitch streamers, cooling people off, suspending them temporarily, banning them, of course, all that stuff. and I'm not so much interested in Twitch exactly, but that metaphor, like what is your space? What spaces are available on your platform, and how do you define those spaces and have rules for like what's in and out and yada yada? I think that's really interesting. And I'm about to summarize. Wikipedia didn't provide the space I was looking for because I haven't reached that level, where I'm a Wikipedia and I'm just sort of a armchair contributor.
It's a real big question. It's not, there's no obvious answer. It's I understand we're all giving elements, but Tim, who started the CDL, is very, very definitive. I mean, at first he was very much pushing back whenever I said federation, and then we finally came to an agreement because his point, and it's a valid point, we don't want more bubbles. We don't want more epistemic bubbles. And if things are on the side and in a way that they're hidden, then people won't trust that the platform is reflecting what they're saying, and they won't trust the platform beyond the point. And we have this whole, oh yeah, we could, for example, have threshold of verification, but then, okay, well, there are people who will say it's only true if I've seen it on Parler. That I'm being a bit facetious here as an extreme, but there are people who think that, right? It's only true if I've seen it in Fox, whatever. And I believe if we're going to do federation, we have to make it so, on the one hand, very easy and permissible to have, well, these are my criteria of verification, and I'll have a view that is not the Fox News, the Fox noise, sorry. And I think that's a legit thing to ask for. But there should always be, at a click of a button, here's all the views of people you disagree with, and add them so that you always have access to the global view. Because cutting yourself off is kind of an anti-goal for CDL, for what I see as the federation effort. We want to include the Nazis and the people we disagree with so that we can refute them. It's important to have the contrarian views represented. This is strong position. I believe that at the same time, I'm not American, and I'm a bit more sympathetic to the European view that we also want to regulate really harmful views. And so it's a bit more complicated than that. And certainly specific harm maybe should not be. But on the other hand, I mean, there's a lot of public debate about, if there's slander, well, people will argue, why is this slander? How do we know it's slander? It's kind of important that it's be there so you can see the reasons to believe this is slander. And you can search for it. Yeah.
What's interesting about, I had a thought based on what you were saying, is that the problem with dangerous language or stuff like that, but the reason why it proliferates so much is that it's not a true marketplace of ideas, probably a bad way to put it, but it's not. If that information is always reachable to its counter argument, then that kind of solves the problem, which is kind of what we're getting to, right?
That's the basic argument of the CDL, yes.
But the fact that people can just throw out these false truths and not be countered on it, and even the little blurbs at the bottom that Facebook's putting on them actually makes the conspiracy theorists believe stronger in the untruths. So we haven't quite figured that out, but the reason that those bad ideas proliferate is not that they're there, but it's that they're using psychological tactics, right? So
that's absolutely true. I agree that having the ideas there with their refutation is extremely important to combat the disinformation. I mean, that's really what it's about, right? On the other hand,
or evidence,
we're thinking about this very abstractly. What I'm saying is, if one,
that's true.
When we're speaking about doxing, for example, doxing is information that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, doxing and, calls of action against
Call to action. And
for bodily harm, for calls for illegal actions against specific individuals or classes of people, or yeah. But yeah, I guess I'm focused.
But it is difficult, because if somebody is calling for action against a class of people, you want to have that contention. Did that person really call for genocide? We're having a case right now in the court,
Or were they,
the international court, about South
or were they
Africa
just using
calling
hyperbole
Israel.
in a yeah. Carl, you've raised your hand several times on.
Well, I was just gonna say, and let me also just say, like, I agree that that there at some point does have to be moderation. Like there are certain speech and suggestions, actions that are unacceptable. But I do think that different platforms, depending on their tool set and maybe their I don't know their community they're able to create, can perhaps bring the bar lower. Like for example, I've been kicked out of subreddits, banned for what I think are relatively reasonable statements, but they were contrarian. But like the moderators were like, no, you're banned. I'm like, oh, like, and to some degree that's Reddit's thing. Like they give kind of absolute autonomy to the moderators of a subreddit, and it has its pluses and its minuses. I definitely think it contributes to filter bubbles that people kind of aren't aware of because they don't see that side of it. They don't know who's getting banned for what. They just know all they see is what continues to exist. But anyway, that's kind of a sub tangent. All I wanted to say was my thinking, and I imagine most people agree, is my goal is not to refute people who have extremely wrong, what I'd call extremely wrong views. And I say that because I don't think it's possible to refute them by conversation. Like that, you talk to those people who've really changed hearts and whatnot. It comes through relationships. It comes through, personal experiences, personal relationships. But so what I want to add is my goal is, though, to some degree, to have an influence on the margin. So if there's people who are moderate, but they see something and they're like, well, I don't know, let me look into it more. And like, oh, wow, this thing's the case. Like, and they might start going down a path. I want to, anyone who's going down a bad one of those paths, try to divert them towards a more, more true, more favorable outcome, so that, yeah, just at the margins of people. Whereas those really wrong people, they're going to exist and they're going to disagree no matter what. And frankly, they probably can't be trusted to use the system in good faith. And the system probably has to be designed to, not to get rid of them, because, if they're being legal and relatively within the bounds of what's acceptable, they're allowed on the platform, but they're not going to change their mind. They're just not.
It's important that they're on the platform. No, I agree. Taiwan has
when they're excluded, if they see, sorry to cut you off, but yeah, like just if they're excluded from the platform, the people who are on the margins, I think some of those people start to wonder, like, well, why are they being excluded? Like, what's wrong with their views? And we've said this, like, you get at least get those wrong views in their stated in a way that's not illegal, it's not directly harmful, if that's possible, and refute them. Like, at least the people who are viewing that be like, oh yeah, I wasn't aware that such and such was the case, or this is being mischaracterized. So, I'm going to dismiss this view, and I don't become hopefully this radicalized person. Yeah.
But this is very important. The reformulation is important. This is where there is a role for moderation. It's like, it should be possible to say, this document is doxing. So and so has done doxing. Maybe you can find it, but we're just saying there is a doxing. We're not giving the address as part of the argument. And this is an exception to the, normally we want to source the reference, but do we want to do that in this case?
Right.
I don't know.
And that transparency of saying that it was doxing, we've determined that, and it's not here, but just so you know what it used to be. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a good way to handle it.
Yeah, but
I feel like I feel like it wouldn't even be too hard to put the thing that they said and just blur out the actual doxing part, just to show that this came from them. And
yeah,
you get nitpicky if you put some of the text, that makes it easier to find in Google, because then you just search for the quote of that text. So, but yes, I mean,
you can still put the surrounding text, like, oh, here is the address of, and they work at, and then you actually completely blank out the other. Or you mean talk about finding the original document out?
I'm just saying a nitpick. Like, if you don't want to, you really don't want to help people find that doxing material at all. And it's a small point, but I was just saying, like, sometimes if you provide enough context of the thing, it makes it easy to find, because you just grab that text, put quotations around it into Google, and Google's good generally at finding things on the web that, you know, if you can give it the direct text, it'll point you right to that document. So
Yeah, I was assuming you
that
were
was
talking
kind of
about
good.
where our system would be the source system, not where you're referencing a source, another source.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
think
Mark Anton was saying we would
looking to.
remove the link so we can't become a source of the doxing. Like a moderator becomes aware that there's doxing going on, makes the decision to remove it, and then leaves a placeholder explaining what did this used to be, just so everyone knows kind of like, because it can leave people with this weird feeling when things just disappear and they don't know why. But like
Right.
if they have some context around it, you know, like, okay, doxing, yeah, I don't like that either. Trust the mods. Hopefully they did the right thing.
I was in a federation context, like inside and outside. We're speaking about original documents that we're and scraping for claims. You can find whatever in the original documents. I would like to keep the link to the source. Provenance is fundamentally important, in my opinion. Just to come back to what you were saying earlier, Carl, about the how people at the margin versus the already extreme people. I agree. What's been found is it's really interesting to get the extreme people to explain how or why they know something, because it does help them rethink their doubt. That's been found to not always work, but be more efficient than arguing for sure.
If you off the
But
top of your head have a source for that, I would love to see it.
yes,
Not,
yes, yes.
not question it, not that I
That's
question it, but just I would love to be able to point to it. Yeah.
no, absolutely. It's the you're not so smart. The guy, what's
How
his name
minds
again?
change. David
How
McGraney.
minds change. Yeah, David McCready. How minds change.
Okay, thank you.
He went through like
But
5 different groups that stumbled across the same sort of pattern of, and actually, although it's asking them, it's often saying, well, what out of 1 to 10, what do you give this? If they give a 9, then you say, well, why is it not a 10? And you actually get them arguing against themselves. And then if they say a 10, then he says, you just say, okay, you don't, there's no point in talking to him.
That's interesting.
the the, but the other thing is about the people on the fence. It was shown in Taiwan, like they did this. They had this strategy. They called it inoculation. Basically, if they had the president even on television, on national television, speak about conspiracy theories as they were emerging, and say, well, there's this conspiracy theory, and here's the problem. And the question is, if people heard about it first in a refutation context, they're less likely to go down the rabbit hole and to look for confirmation. It's like, yes, we know that. I mean, of course, this is because also the president was trusted by the citizens beyond a point. But the notion of where you heard it first is really important. So finding the conspiracies before they emerge is extremely, like, as people are making their mind, is absolutely fundamental. But there was a notion of inoculation against disinformation.
I have to hop. I missed that I have a 1 p.m. This has been an amazing conversation. Sorry to just leave so quickly. And thank you so much for contributing, all of you. And sorry if I went too length at any point. All right,
You're at time.
It was nice talking to you.
Talk to you soon. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And we are actually over our time.
Exactly.
So it's up to the group on who has time and who wants to close it off. We didn't get real deep in the UX. You might have a better idea of what we're working on. We're always happy to see anything you're working on or talk through problems. Like you said, it's like I can't figure out how to like explain this, or here's what I have, but it doesn't hit it here. Always happy to brainstorm on that.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I feel the juices flowing right now, so hopefully I'll be able to come up with something. But I really, it feels like the big unsolved question for me is still like how. I think that like everything, all the 3 dimensions have to work together. Like that it's not like an optional thing. I think it has to be designed like that personally, and I think for me it's just a matter of how can they flow back and forth between one another, and not overwhelm with information. Because like with your weight representation, it's valuable information, but I'm trying to like think about it on like a pixel level of like how much light and like contrast is hitting people's eyes, and I'm trying to reduce that as much as possible, to make things as simple as possible. I think that like now there's a problem with design where things are too simple. Like when it comes to like logos and things like that. But I don't want to have too much complexity, and cause that to like subconsciously overwhelm people.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we need to go more into that because I kind of feel like the scoring gives that. I mean, the number, the way they're visualized right now is overly complex. But if you just think, I mean, what's the minimum amount of information people need to know? And that is how what's well, I don't know, from this system is this thing true or false, and how true or how false? And then what are the reasons for that score? There's no, and then as long as you're just looking at one layer at a time, then it's very, very little pieces of information. Yeah, I guess I've been going down the same path to try and find what's the least amount of information to show that's useful. And I can't, I don't think I can get any smaller.
Yeah. I wonder about something I've been thinking about is like the way we're interacting with it, like with our hands. Like is it unrealistic to say maybe whatever the mouse is what's highlighted and everything else fades away, so that you follow something and then that's all that's visible really, and then you can kind of go back and check another route. Like obviously, like I think like
I guess something to kind of explain it though about what the UI is doing is that normally you would not see the whole expanded map. And that's what I couldn't show you and why it's covering up. It would just be one node and its children.
um
And then
okay
you might want to keep that context, but yeah, fade all those out and then just look at the node you're looking at and its immediate children. So you just have its score and its child scores. And so that's the only thing that is visible. And to Marc Antoine's point, if there's more than like 5 or 6 children, you'll want to filter those and let them know there's more. But these are the ones that are either the most contentious or the most true or the most false.
okay I didn't get that part.
Yeah, no, that's because it's not there yet. I need to fix that. But that's a good point. So yeah, so we're working on that. So maybe in a week or two I'll be there and we could see if you can push against it some more. But also if you have any ideas, this isn't an all about Bentley thing. So I mean I'd like it to be, but it's not.
I was looking at your flow thing and I was thinking, yeah, I should be able to add flow in the bead line, like bead size, stuff like that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have a couple of like vertical versions. I kept cracking my head on it and I said I'll just use 2 dimensions instead of.
Yeah, I'm really trying to avoid 2 dimensions for.
Yeah, I tried, but it broke my brain. And I figured what I'd do is I'll go wide, figure it out, and then I'll go back to narrow because there's too much in it. Although you don't have I think you don't have as complex a flow as mine.
No, I'm wrong.
Oh, yours might be, it's complex in a different way, I guess. You don't have the problem with scores going to 0, which is my problem. How do you visually represent nothing?
Circle.
It has to be how much does it, well, okay, but it's a circle full or empty?
An empty circle, if it's empty, of course.
Well, that could be something that's full that has a border.
What?
a circle with
A circle, not a disk. Just a circle, an empty circle.
a lot of UIs have that as, I mean, that's assuming the background is the same color as the inside, as the fill or no fill of the circle. You don't know whether it's filled or not filled. So visually, if that's all you have is empty ones, a lot of people will assume that they're all full instead of all empty. So it only works if you have a full one next to it.
Right. Well, what I
That's why I
would do,
chose a
and
bucket actually at one point. So I have a bucket because the bucket has one no border on one side. So then you can visually see that it's empty unambiguously.
what I see is very few things will be zeros, right? Most things will be very small up or very small down. Am I right?
No.
No?
I have a lot of claims that people make that are just stupid and they're all zero. And
Okay.
if the parent is zero, all the children are zero. Oh, and I guess the other problem is if the parent's zero, technically all the children are zero, even if they had a weight, because we're talking about the contribution to the grandparent. So how do I visually show the weights of all the things that were canceled out? But
But
we don't need
but
to
what I'm
get
saying
that.
is I can imagine something that is up, that is, small up. Then you don't put a circle, you put a triangle, and small down is a triangle the other side, an inverted triangle. And then, of course, then the opacity is about how important the flow is. And you have that way there's no chance of confusing the circle with the triangle.
Yeah, there's just no, but
You
then
may
they have
need
to know. They have to know. They have to have it. There's a legend on what. It's not intuitive.
yes,
What's the difference between
you
a
need a
circle?
legend. I'm there. I'm one principle of UX that I've never accepted is the notion that people, like, nobody jumps into a 747 without training. The notion that the thing has to be usable with zero prior knowledge, for me, is ridiculous. Now, of course, we can, we have hover tool tips, we have all kinds of tools, but the notion that you have to spend some time getting your bearings and learning a legend, for me, is perfectly valid and natural.
Yeah, well, you can't ever get to zero, but you want to get as close as possible. Like an exit door, there's a reason
Yes.
why that's a bar that you press in, right? Because if you're running,
Yep. No, of course.
that's
I'm
just what I'm
aware of that.
fighting for. I'm reducing the legend, but yes, I know you can't get down to zero. I just there's an intuition to me that it's
But there's an intuition
something
to
else
me
there.
that we're building tools for knowledge workers, and power tools have some learning curve.
Yeah, it's just I guess that's the difference is right now I'm working on what's the display mechanism to the average human of this extensive data is where my focus is right now.
Well, fair. But even then, I mean, if it's going to represent a lot of complex data relationships, there might be a bit of a learning curve. I don't think learning curves are evil. We have to
Yeah.
learn to read. We're creating a new language. People have to learn to read. There's a bit of time spent there.
Yeah.
I'm not,
And if they really want to fight, if they're concerned about the truth in a way, they'll learn it.
yeah. I mean, I know that it's not. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, and that's what I was gonna kind of get at earlier is I feel like for me, I love shortcuts so much. And I know that's not everybody's thing, but I think that it should be there should be a slow way of using it, which is still technically usable and you can get around. But I think that the optimized version is one where you have your fingers resting on certain keys that you can either map or use the standard layout, and it works in coordination with your mouse, and you can really just like navigate through things. And that's where you get like the true experience, as opposed to one point of contact.
There, I'm with you. Shortcuts are wonderful, and the question of learnability is always there, right? The reality is you don't show everything at once. but you have to show a little affordance that people can hover over and say, oh, there's something there and I can learn from. Oh, look, this thing changes when I do this other thing, so it might be related. It's all about learnability and giving enough visual display, but hoping that they'll understand the function of every widget at the outset. That's ridiculous. The question is there a path to learning from ignorance? Is there a path from ignorance to learning? That's really important. There I'm with you folks. But that it should all make sense at the beginning, for me, is I've decided is a non-goal. But again, that's me being a bit radical there.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also thinking of the on-ramp of like what value can they get out of it with very little knowledge, and then how can they ramp up easily? How can we make a pit of success to where they're discovered?
Yeah. Absolutely, it's true.
So that's, yeah, I'm not a purist on, but I probably spend too much time thinking about, well, because I would like, this isn't happening in the current design. I would like someone to look at that and get a feel for, oh, there's a lot of purple on that. And in mine, of course, you have to know that the purple is the pro and the orange is the con. So there's some con. You have to learn that. I didn't want to use green and red. But with that, I want them to be able to look at it and say, oh, there's a lot of stuff over here. That's a place I might want to explore, if that's going to work, I don't know. So is there experimental UIs? And like we said before, I don't think there's going to be a one UI to rule them all. There'll be different
we all
ways.
agree on that.
But I think this would be an interesting one for videos to walk people through, but I'll need to have an opening and closing, not just a static map, because that's too busy.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Talk to
Ciao,
you
ciao.
later.
Nice talking to y'all. Take care.